He fired me before sunrise and thought he'd won by lunchtime. I held the keys to every car he'd need to survive. It was a Monday that tasted like battery acid. The showroom lights hadn't even warmed up yet, the coffee still burbling in the break room, the flags in the lot snapping against a stubborn coastal breeze. I stood in my office at Harrigan Motor Works, the place my father built with his hands and a handshake, watching a man in a suit that squeaked when he moved rummage through my desk like it was already a relic. Security, though in our place that meant Gus from the service bay, a grandfather with forearms like carved oak who had known me since I learned to ride a bike. He couldn't look at me as he lifted my family photo and coiled my charging cable. My sales approach is too soft, my younger brother Dylan said, leaning on the edge of what used to be Dad's desk. 3 days after the papers made him owner, and he'd already changed the office from a lived-in nest of leather and pine into a chrome spaceship. The fishing photos were gone, the old cracked chair that smelled like motor oil and wintergreen replaced by something that hummed when you Saturday. We're entering a new era, Miles. People don't choose a dealership because you remember their dog's name anymore. We need velocity. We need numbers. We need hunger. I didn't remind him hunger was the thing that got us here. I didn't say that a lot of people still came by just to tell Dad how far the old Buick had gone under our care. I didn't argue at all. It wouldn't have changed a thing. I watched Gus tuck my stapler into a cardboard box and didn't tell him to keep it. I'd bought the stapler at a dollar store my first week, convinced little things matter. You'll get 2 months, Dylan said, eyes flicking to his screen, the glow pulsing at his cheekbones. Severance. Professional courtesy. There it was. Courtesy. From my brother. In the business named for our family. I took the box from Gus, and he mumbled, "Sorry, kid," to a man who was 41 and had a teenager of his own. I nodded and walked out under the sign that still read Harrigan Motor Works, like nothing inside it could change. 16 years ended in 15 minutes and 5 cardboard flaps. The parking lot smelled like rain that couldn't make up its mind. I set the box on my truck's hood and stared through the showroom glass where a young guy in a mirror-shiny suit was already gesturing with the manic energy of a man who has only learned sales from videos that promised passive income. Dylan waved at me with a knuckle, a little flick like he was shooing a fly. I raised my hand in a polite, palm-out hello, and wondered how long before he learned what hunger tastes like with no inventory. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Diane at Pioneer Motor Group. 2 p.m. Still good? I smiled for the first time that morning. Absolutely. I typed and added, schedule's wide open. I put the phone away, slid the box onto the passenger seat, and let the engine settle into the kind of low growl that always calmed me. Dad was unreachable in the backcountry with his fly rod and his stubborn peace. The last thing he'd said to me before he left was, "Keep the coffee hot." Maybe the temperature would change by the time he got back. I didn't tell anyone at Harrigan Motor Works that 3 days earlier, in a quiet office above a parts warehouse on the other side of town, I'd signed a contract with Pioneer Motor Group, PMG, to everyone who counted, as their regional distributor for the coastal North Territory. It had been a long time coming. Their VP of sales, a woman named Diane who knew how to spot the difference between charm and character, had been circling me for months. "You run the allocation," she'd said. 17 dealerships from Eureka to Monterey. You decide who gets what, when, and at which wholesale tier. We want someone who still understands that a relationship can save a business when a spreadsheet says it's doomed. I'd taken the weekend to think, held the unsigned papers like they might burn me. I walked through the empty showroom early Saturday before open and remembered the first time Dad tossed me the keys to a work truck and said, "Take MS. Elkins to the DMV so she doesn't lose half a day waiting on a bus." He always believed in making it easy for people to say yes. That afternoon, I had found myself in the hallway near Dylan's office, papers in hand, when I heard him laughing on the phone. "Once Dad's out, I'm cleaning house," he said. "New team, new process. No hand-holding. Miles is good with birthdays and empathy, but he sells like it's 1999. We'll restructure once the ink dries." I'd stood so still the motion sensor light in the hallway had clicked off around me. The only illumination was the glow under Dylan's door. There's a quiet that climbs into your bones when you realize someone you love has been waiting for your exit. I walked back to my office and signed Diane's contract with a pen Dad had given me when I earned the title Senior Sales Director, even though titles never meant much under our roof. Pioneer processed the paperwork over a weekend and a blur. Monday morning, Dylan fired me and called it modernization. I left with my box and drove straight to PMG. Diane had an office with my name already on the door. It wasn't the biggest room in the building. It didn't need to be. She introduced me to the three-person logistics team. Kenny with a brain like a map, Olga who could turn a doc schedule into a dance, Lisa whose fingers flew over the keyboard like she was playing an instrument. On the wall was a laminated map of my territory punctured by 17 red pins. The largest pin just happened to line up neatly with the pier that had anchored my life. You'll have full access to Maverick, Diane said, meaning PMG's allocation software. It's a beast at first, but it tells you everything you need to know: historic performance, seasonal patterns, predictive models for demand, holdbacks, floor plan constraints. You'll approve orders, assign priority, and set wholesale within our margin bands. You'll get yelled at. You'll get bribed. You'll get thanked sometimes. Choose the thanks you can live with. I'm a quick learner, I said. It sounded cocky coming out of my mouth. It felt like a prayer. The Maverick system was a spaghetti bowl of logic, if I'm honest, but it was my kind of mess. It remembered which dealers paid on time and which ones always needed an extra day. It marked with a little orange star the stores that overpromised and underdelivered. It marked with a blue heart the ones whose customers sent cakes to the service lane at Christmas. It did not have a star for owned by my brother, who just fired me. I didn't ask for one. I spent the first week learning the rhythm. Morning calls to parts managers, lunchtime check-ins with transport, late-day approvals before the warehouse closed. I introduced myself to the 17 store owners by phone. Most of them knew who I was, if not from sale boards then from barbecue fundraisers and the time I stood in the rain with a sign at a high school car wash. They responded with cautious enthusiasm. "We've heard you do things the right way, Miles," said the owner from North Shore Auto, her voice warm and steady. "Let's see if that's true on Thursdays when the allocations drop." On Thursday afternoon, my phone lit with the number from my old life. Lydia from accounting at Harrigan Motor Works whispered into the receiver like she was calling me from behind a curtain. "Dylan's losing his mind," she said. "The system's flagging every order. We can't get anything confirmed. The lot's already thin, and it's only the first week of the month." "That sounds like a supplier issue," I said, because that was the line. She sighed like I'd disappointed her personally. "He says he can't get anyone at PMG to answer. You've always handled it. Could you?" She trailed off. I pictured her biting the inside of her cheek, the way she did when numbers didn't add up, but pride kept her from asking for help. "I don't work there anymore, Lydia," I said. "I know," she whispered. "I just didn't know who else to call." My stomach tightened for the first time since the box. "Tell him to go through the portal. There's a new owner verification step. It's all standard." 2 hours later, Dylan called, and I let it go to voicemail. He did not ask. He demanded. He said I broke something. He said fix it. He said a few other words that weren't in Dad's dictionary. I waited until morning when the sun made the office windows glow like the outside world still existed. I dialed the number that had once been my lifeline. Harrigan Motor Works. Dylan barked, then caught himself. "This is Dylan." "Morning," I said. "Got your message. About damn time. We need 16 vehicles here by Tuesday. The system's blocking everything. Stop playing games." "Have you talked to your PMG rep?" I asked, and I made sure my voice was even. I'd learned a long time ago that being calm in a storm convinces people the boat's not sinking. They keep redirecting me to some new distributor approval process, like we're a brand new used lot. I don't have time for bureaucratic hoops. Just tell me what you did to our account before you left. "I didn't do anything to your account," I said. "The process for new ownership has extra checks. It's standard." There was a silence that sounded like him pinching the bridge of his nose. "Who do I have to call to skip it?" "You'd want the regional distributor," I said. "Right. And who is that? I've asked 3 people, and nobody will give me the name." "It's me," I said and waited. "What?" "I'm PMG's regional distributor for the coastal north." Another silence. Longer. He laughed once, the sound of someone trying on disbelief to see if it fits. "That's not possible. You can't approve our orders. That's a conflict. I'll call Dad." "It's not a conflict," I said. "It's my job. And Dad is in a canyon where the fish don't carry phones. You'll get your allocation based on the same criteria as everyone else." "So you're going to hold our inventory hostage because you can't take criticism?" "I didn't say hostage," I said. I said review. How long? It's usually 2 to 3 weeks for new owners, I said, glancing at the calendar where in red ink I had written, breathe. We'll have bare asphalt in 3, he said, and the first crack of fear slid through the hard shell in his voice. You can't do this to family. I'm not doing anything to family, I said. I'm doing my job for 17 families. You son of a. I'll personally review your file, I said, and ended the call because I could hear my own heart starting to beat in my throat. The city moved like it always did below my window, bikes wobbling past delivery vans, a couple arguing about plants outside the florist, a dog asleep in a rectangle of sun. The world never stops to watch you choose who you're going to be. My phone rang again. Dylan. I silenced it, and the next ring was a number that turned my bones into glass. Dad lit up my screen. He should have been unreachable, the man who disappears to breathe when life gets loud. But Dylan was nothing if not resourceful when he needed a witness. What the hell is going on? Dad said without hello. He sounded like he did the time our fence fell and the neighbor's goats were eating his tomatoes. Your brother says you're blocking his inventory. I'm not blocking anything, I said. I'm working for PMG now. Dylan fired me last week. First day as owner. Silence. Then, pain masquerading as skepticism. He says you quit. I have the paperwork, I said, and I could hear the paper in my mind. The word severance underlined like kindness. 2 months. Professional courtesy. Another silence. This one heavier, settling like a snowfall. And now you're what, Miles? The gatekeeper? Regional distributor, I said. All allocations for our territory go through me. So you're getting back at him. I'm doing my job, I said, and hated that it came out as defense instead of truth. His orders flagged for review like any new ownership. That's the protocol. Protocol, Dad repeated. 40 years, and we've never needed that word to know what's right. The disappointment in his voice was not a knife. It was a weight. I built that place for both of you. I thought I was handing you something that would outlive me, not ammunition. I gave it 16 years, I said, my voice tighter than it should have been. I didn't start this. But you can finish it, he said. I'm coming home. You don't have to. I'm coming home, he repeated and hung up, because when Dad finished a sentence it stayed finished. I didn't move for a long time. I watched a pair of gulls fight in the sky and thought of the first car Dad ever sold at the old lot. A sun-faded sedan he polished by hand, as if it were a jewel. He made me go to the buyer's house that afternoon with a basket of cookies and a handwritten note that said, if anything rattles funny, call me, even if it's your nerves. Diane knocked on my door like she didn't want to intrude on whatever storm was in there. You okay? She asked. She knew the answer before I did. I told her about Dylan calling, about Dad, about the history she had only read in articles. She listened for a while, then tipped her head like a bird. There's something I didn't mention before, she said. I didn't want to stir up family complications unless it mattered. She closed the door. Your brother approached us 3 months ago. He told our corporate team he intended to switch suppliers as soon as the ink dried. He wanted a 15% price cut across the board, or he'd move the whole store to Riverton Auto. I blinked dumbly at her. Riverton. Cobalt and Riverton have been offering sweetheart deals to new owners. Riverton is fast and loose. Cheap inventory, thin warranties, pretty brochures. He was shopping aggressively. We said no to the 15% because it wasn't sustainable. But we could see which way the wind blew, so we came to you. Frankly, we weren't sure if Harrigan would remain a PMG store under Dylan. The room narrowed. It wasn't just me he had pushed out. He was going to sell Dad's signature for a discount. Dad would never. Dad wasn't going to be in charge, Diane said. We wanted to keep the relationship in the family if we could. We picked the side that still believes they'll have to look people in the eye at the grocery store. After she left, I stared at Maverick's screen until the numbers blurred and swam. In the corner lived Harrigan's pending order, a neat stack of digital requests labeled urgent with 100 exclamation points that Dylan's mouse must have hammered. I hovered my hand over the trackpad and didn't click anything. I slept almost not at all. When sleep did arrive, it looked like Dad's face when he found my first report card with a D in math, the disappointed gentleness of a man who knows you can do better and is waiting for you to prove him right. At 5, I gave up and showered by the light of the hall so the house wouldn't wake. The city at dawn is a different city, trash trucks and joggers, and people who look like they've been up all night by choice. I got to the office before the building heaters had a chance to decide. I started making calls. East Coast dealers were already on their second cup of coffee, and logistics managers on that side of the world like to talk before lunch. I checked allocation histories, flagged late payments, cross-checked satisfaction surveys with repeat business. I built a map in my head of where we were and where we could go if we steered instead of drifted. At 9, I called Lydia again. She answered on the first ring. "He's been in since 6, she whispered. "He keeps circling the showroom like he can will the cars to multiply." "I need the last 3 years of sales and service retention," I said. "Customer satisfaction scores, warranty claims, all of it." He locked down the shared drive. "You've been here 12 years, I said. "You know which drawers squeak. I'm not asking you to break anything. I'm asking you to remember where we hid the extra key." She didn't answer for a long breath. "Give me an hour," she said, and hung up. By 10, an email hit my personal account labeled recipes, because Lydia is subtle even when she's panicking. It was all there. The models that made us the most money not at the sale, but over the life of the relationship. The years where a discount bought us a headache. The service bay calendar that proved the cars with thicker margins came back more often and left customers angrier. And there, slipped into a second tab, were 3 quotes from Riverton that Dylan had requested 2 months back. 15% cheaper on paper, 25% more expensive in failure and shame. Dad texted that he'd be at the Olive Mill Cafe at noon. A neutral booth, he wrote. A table where no one had the home field. I printed the numbers. I tapped the stack into a neat square like formality could protect us from what needed to be said. He looked older when I walked into the cafe, his shoulders not as square as they used to be, his hat set down on the table like a fragile thing he didn't entirely trust the world to hold. We ordered coffee that steamed and sat. He said, "Your brother tells a different story," and I slid the termination papers across the formica. He read them without blinking, and his jaw clenched in a way I hadn't seen since the time our neighbor's kid backed a truck into Dad's lathe. "This doesn't sound like Dylan," he said out of habit, not conviction. "Dad," I said, and pushed the Riverton quotes across. "He's been planning to flip the supplier since February. He told PMG we were overpriced and slow. He asked for evaluation from 2 chain groups. He's not modernizing. He's staging." Dad turned the pages with care a man usually saves for birth certificates. He stopped at the header that read relocation terms, eyes tracking the paragraph that cheerfully explained how easily a dealership could be moved if a property lease expired. "We never taught you boys that trick," he said. "Because it's not a trick. It's a betrayal." He wanted to juice short-term profits to make himself look like a savior and then sell your sign to a holding company, I said. And he would have done it with cars that break more often and scream louder. Dad rubbed his eyes like grit had gotten in there at the lake. "And now you hold the spigot," he said. "You can turn it on or keep it dry." "I have a plan," I said, because he raised me not to show up to a problem without tools. I pushed the folder I'd stayed up building. "PMG will put us in their premium lane if we commit to quality-first practices. That means different inventory mix, a service package that extends beyond warranty, a loaner policy that keeps people mobile, and a community program that brings the baseball team and the PDA back through our doors. It's slower money on day 1, bigger money by year 3. It's who we are." "Who we were," he corrected softly. "Who we can still be," I said. He studied the pages, the graphs where the lines shaped hope, his reading glasses halfway down his nose because he refused to buy the right kind. "Dylan won't accept this," he said. "I know. Then what's the point?" "The point is you still own the land," I said. "You still own the building. The business is his. The foundation is yours." He stared at me for a long time as if he could see all the versions of me he knew layered over the one at the table. "You want me to evict my son," he said, not accusing, just wanting to hear the words out loud. "I want you to give him a choice," I said. "Run Harrigan the way it was built, or sell his stake back at fair market and take his skills somewhere they fit. He can take his license. He can open a place with Riverton on the edge of town if he wants. But the sign over this door should mean what it has always meant." He leaned back, the leather of the booth creaking. He ran his finger along a groove carved into the table from some previous argument unrelated to us. "And if I say no? I'll approve his order today," I said, throat tight. "I'll step back. He'll do what he wants. And the next time someone brings you a lemon pound cake and tells you you saved their kid's first car, You can tell yourself nothing's changed while your name gets printed on flyers for a fire sale. He let the silence do its work for a full minute. Then he pulled out his phone with the same hands that had taught me how to tie a fly and hold a torque wrench. "Martha," he said when his attorney answered, "I need the lease. I need to know exactly what it says about operational standards. Today." He looked at me, and there was grief in his gaze and relief wrapped around it like twine. "If you boys weren't mine, I'd be proud of both of you," he said. "As it is, I'm going to be proud of one of you anyway." 2 days later, the conference room at Harrigan smelled like lemon cleaner and tension. The windows showed a lot with too much bare concrete between lonely cars. Martha spread 3 documents like a dealer laying out a hand with 2 aces and a trap. "Option 1, she said to Dylan, sliding the first page. "You continue as owner under a revised lease. Conditions include maintaining PMG as exclusive supplier for 5 years, adherence to service standards specified in Exhibit B, and community engagement commitments we'll define together. Failure triggers termination rights." Dylan didn't touch it. He looked at Dad. "You're kidding." "Option 2, Martha continued, like she hadn't heard him, sliding the next. "You sell your ownership back to Robert and Miles at fair market valuation, less losses directly resulting from inventory disruption over the past month." "Extortion," Dylan spat, his face flushing the way it always did when he was cornered but refused to admit it. "Option 3, Martha said, serene in a way only a woman who has read every contract in 3 counties can be. "You keep your business but relocate within 30 days. We terminate the lease under the clause permitting such action for cause." "You'll evict your own son?" Dylan demanded, and Dad didn't flinch. "You fired your brother and lied about it," Dad said, voice quiet and steady as a torque wrench. "You plan to drag our name through a discount that looks good until a family can't start their minivan on the first cold morning. What do you want me to pretend I'm protecting?" Dylan stood so fast his chair barked against the tile. He paced to the window and stared out at the empty diagonal lines in the lot. He'd always hated losing more than he loved winning. "You two planned this," he said. "You've been waiting to humiliate me." "I wanted to work beside you," I said. "I wanted to argue about trim levels and whether the coffee should be free or $1 because free coffee brings the wrong people. And Dad always said there are no wrong people if you're doing it right. You forced my hand." He turned. The anger in his face softened into something that looked like a kid who scraped his knee. "How much?" he asked finally, almost a whisper. "Fair market," I said. "You can land on your feet in a city where your last name doesn't hang over the door." He stared at the papers for a long time. He reached for the second document the way you reach for a live wire you're not sure is shut off. He read the first page, then the last, then the signature line. He didn't look at me when he bent to sign. The sound of his pen on paper was the most honest thing in the room. He put the pen down and walked out without saying goodbye. The door sighed shut behind him. The silence that followed didn't feel like victory. It felt like the cleanup after a storm. Dad sat down as if the chair had been holding him upright and now needed to hold him together. He scrubbed his palm across his face. "You could have cut him off entirely," he said. "You could have watched him choke." "It wouldn't have been right," I said. "That's why you're sitting here," he said. "And why your kids will have a place to work if they want it, and a place to buy a car if they don't." 6 months later, the showroom glowed in the kind of light you only get when the weather cooperates with your plans. The new sign over the door read Harrigan and Son because Dad insisted we keep it singular like the past, even though there were 2 of us now. One retired on paper, but somehow busier than ever, shaking hands and telling the story of the time he sold a car to a man who paid in nickels. The floor was full again, not with just anything but with the right things, models people wanted and could trust. We'd shifted the mix toward what PMG called their heritage line. Cars built with more steel than plastic and warranties that didn't require a lawyer to decipher. The service bay hummed. We were booked 3 weeks out and had to hire 2 techs Dad approved personally with a wrench test and a conversation about ethics. We set up a loaner program for families stuck when their only car hiccuped. We started Second Saturdays, a free clinic where we taught first-time buyers how to check tire pressure and read the warning lights that scare more than they inform. People brought donuts and questions, and sometimes their grandmothers. The smell of coffee and rubber and gratitude felt like the old days but sharper, like we were playing the same song with better instruments. Diane stopped by one afternoon, leaning against the hood of a mid-sized sedan while she watched the Saturday traffic. "Looks good," she said, and she meant it in numbers and in feeling. "The premium allocation's working. You're making us look smart." "You did that when you hired me," I said, and she rolled her eyes like anyone else who has been doing their job long enough to know compliments are nice, but results pay rent. We hadn't heard from Dylan. Rumors said he'd gone inland and was running a sales team under a banner that looked like it had been designed by an algorithm trained on aggressive and modern. A mutual friend mentioned he'd stopped using our last name on his business cards. Sometimes at night, after the house got quiet and the cat decided I was furniture again, I thought about calling him. I didn't. Not because I hated him, but because the kindest thing I could do for both of us was let time do what arguments could not. One evening, as the sun went down and the floor tiles reflected it in gold, Dad lingered by the door under the new sign. He tilted his head, reading it for the 100th time like it might change if he stared hard enough. "You know," he said, "I always imagined it would say this." He chuckled softly. "I just imagined a different sun most of the time." "I know," I said. "There are truths that hurt less when you don't try to put a ribbon on them." "I thought your way was soft," he said. "Turns out it was sturdy. Like a tire with too much tread to look fancy, but too much grip to spin." "Mom used to say you only bought shoes that would outlast your patience," I said, and he laughed enough that his shoulders shook. We locked up together, the click of the deadbolt louder than usual in the quiet. "You could have ruined him," he said as we walked to our cars, which were parked deliberately beside each other like old men on a bench. "You could have kept the spigot closed and called it justice." "It wouldn't have been right," I repeated, "because some sentences earn the right to be said twice." "That's why you're here and he's not," he said. "That's why that sign means something again." A week later, a woman named Carmen came in with a toddler on her hip and a story under her eyes. Her minivan had died 45 minutes from our lot. She had 2 jobs and $17 in her account until payday. She said a prayer at our counter, and it sounded like, "I'm sorry to bother you." We gave her a loaner, swapped her alternator, and charged her a number that wouldn't take food out of anyone's mouth. She cried in the waiting area while the toddler smashed goldfish crackers into the carpet, and I pretended not to see because dignity is worth more than shampooing. That night, writing up the day's notes, I thought about all the ways revenge could have tasted sweet. Late-night calls denied, orders flagged and flagged again until a man panicked and learned respect the way some people learn to swim by being thrown into a lake. But sitting under the soft hum of the office lights, I realized I didn't want sweet. I wanted solid. I wanted to leave the keys on the desk at closing time and know the building would be there for someone in the morning the way it had always been there for me. We held a small event in the lot the next month. Not a grand opening because that's what stores do when they're trying to sound like they didn't just paint the walls, but a thank you. We grilled hot dogs, let the middle school jazz band play 3 songs on a platform of wooden pallets, and raffled off a year of oil changes to anyone who could tell Dad the name of the dog he'd kept biscuits for in the top drawer for a decade. "Spartacus," shouted a man in a faded baseball cap. He ate half a bag when I turned around. I stood under the shade tent with a clipboard that had nothing on it and watched as people waved at each other across the lot, as if the place were a church without sermons. Late that night, after the trash bags were tied and the grill was covered, I went inside alone. The showroom was dim, the cars looking like sleeping animals. I walked to Dad's desk, his again now, though the spaceship chair was banished to storage and the old leather throne had been revived with oil until it gleamed like it remembered. I sat down and opened the top drawer. I took out a pen and a pad of plain white paper. I wrote a note to myself and slid it into the drawer where I would find it the next time things got complicated. It said, "If you can't sleep, find someone whose car won't start. Fix that." A few weeks later, Gus came by with his granddaughter on his day off to show her where Grandpa worked. He slapped my shoulder and handed me a key ring he'd kept in his locker for 20 years, a weird stainless steel thing shaped like a wrench. "Found this when I cleaned," he said. "Thought you should have it. It was your mom's. She used to say this place was built on bolts and birthdays." "Sounds like her," I said, and couldn't speak for a second. He filled the silence the way smart men do. "You handled it right," he said. "You know how I know? Because you still walk straight. A lot of men get even and end up crooked." Sometimes I still dream of the morning Dylan waved me off while Gus packed my stapler. In the dream, I turn around and walk back in and tell him every future mistake he's going to make and every avoidable hurt he's going to cause. In the dream, he listens. In real life, he didn't. He had to learn by burning his fingers. I had to learn by not setting the fire. People ask me what I did when my brother fired me from my own life. They want a short answer for the comments section. I tell them I got a new job, which is true. I tell them I let the process do what it does, which is also true. I don't tell them about the nights I sat in my truck in the driveway because the house felt too loud with nothing in it, or that some mornings I opened the shop 2 hours early just to smell the place before anyone else did. And remember, that work is a kind of prayer. Diane sent me a note on our 1-year mark that said, "Premium status renewed. Your region's the best performing on both revenue and retention." I printed it and taped it inside the closet door where no one will see it but me, and I can smile at it when I'm looking for a clean shirt, and the only ones left are the ones with grease on the elbow. The numbers matter. The people matter more. The alignment of the two is what makes a life. Every now and then, a white envelope shows up with no return address. Inside is a check for the exact cost of an alternator, or a starter, or a set of tires, plus 10%, payable to the community fund we set up for customers in free fall. The signature line reads, "A friend." Lydia swears it's not her, because she would sign her name and demand the tax write-off. Dad doesn't quite hide the way his mouth tilts when one arrives. I have a guess where they come from. I don't say it out loud. We're building something forward, not looking backward to see who's following. If you had told me the morning I set a box on my truck that 6 months later I'd stand under a sign with my name still on it and not feel like a thief, I would have laughed and then gone somewhere to be alone so you wouldn't see me cry. But the road bends where you don't expect, and if you don't white-knuckle the wheel, sometimes it drops you in front of the building you were meant to be in all along, with the people you were meant to be beside, doing work that looks suspiciously like love. He fired me before sunrise and thought he'd won. By lunchtime, I did hold the keys to every car he needed. It would have been easy to dangle them and demand groveling. Instead, I put the keys on a hook labeled "Process," and I put my hands where they belonged, on the small, indivisible tasks that keep an engine running and a family moving and a business honest. It wasn't as dramatic as revenge often is in stories, but it held. It held when the wind blew and when a man's pride tried to knock it over, and when the count came due for decisions none of us could take back. If there's a lesson I could write on the wall above Dad's desk for whoever sits there in 20 years, it would be this: do the right thing slowly enough to make it permanent, and quickly enough to keep the lights on. And when someone waves you off like you're a minor inconvenience in a story they think they own, smile if you can. You might be leaving with a cardboard box, but you also might be taking the part that matters most.